Hi, my name is Sean Ruffle, and now that the App Engine is out of beta with the release of the 1.3 production firmware, I thought I would go through the phone API. For those of you who don't know, the Digium IP phones contain an app engine on them that allows you to install JavaScript applications on the phone to allow you to really customize the user experience. So you can do things like display ambient information like weather, stock quotes, news headlines. You can also do business process automation, like say you want to allow people to punch a time clock from a phone terminal, or you want to display customer service scripts and feed prompts that phone agents are going to ask people that they're calling and record their responses. These are all different types of things that you can do with customized applications for the Digium IP phone. So to jumpstart any development that you may want to do, I thought I would go over the phone API. And the first thing you want to know is where are the development resources, and the central clearinghouse for information about the phone API is the phones.digium.com, and here you can see a description of the API. Here there's some guides that talk about common development tasks, and there's also some demo applications, and some of these I'll be going through in this video. If you click on the demo applications, there's you can download the zip file that contains the source code. If you want to get started really quickly, I also have most of those demo apps exported in a GitHub account under sruffle Digium phone apps. I have to clone that. And if you look here and see, those are mostly the same demos that are on the website with the addition of a menu example. So if you want to go ahead and run these demos and get them on a phone, I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So the first thing you need is a phone, and I have a window here that shows the graphics of a phone, and this was written with just a little script that constantly grabs a screenshot essentially. So this isn't something that's part of the phone, but it helps me record this video. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that your phone, if you have a phone, is configured for app development. So if you go to the admin settings menu and under system tools, you want to make sure that option 2 says disable app development like it did. I already had it enabled on this phone. Let me turn it off and I'll turn it back on for you. Here's it comes up. Reloading. So okay, so let's go and enable app development on the phone. So I'm bringing up the menu. It's coming, it's coming. Okay, there we go. So bring up the menu, go to admin settings, type in your admin password, system tools, and then option 2, enable app development. So once you have that enabled on your phone, you can check that. If you go to the IP address of your phone and go to an app dev screen, if this actually comes up with the create app button, you know that you have app development enabled on your phone. And the reason why you have to turn that on is need an admin password is so that if you have phones deployed in an environment, you don't want necessarily people tweaking with their phones. So it allows the phone system administrator to control who can actually perform app development on their phone. The next thing you would want, I believe, is some kind of JavaScript lint program. So either if you already have one that you're familiar with, great. If not, I have these example applications configured to use JavaScript lint, which you can get from Dave Pacheco, JavaScript lint. And if you go ahead and make and install this, and by the way, I'm using Linux here, Linux console, so make install, and if you under the build install, if you install those somewhere in your path, and then if you can run JavaScript lint, it's installed. And what that does is, because of the time it takes to build a phone package and put it on the phone and test it out as relatively long. By being able to run a code checker like JavaScript lint before you do that can really save a lot of time if you're not perhaps super familiar with the JavaScript language. So once you have that, if you run the make in the Hello World program, I have a make target that just runs the Hello World JavaScript file through the lint, and you can see that there's no errors. And say I did have an error in there, and you can see that it's telling there's an undeclared identifier, and it's better to know that before I actually push it to the phone. So let's go ahead and push the Hello World to the phone. Okay, so as a convenience for developing from the console, you can use the CGI script that's on the phone, and that's described under the guides here for how to use the phone app development CGI scripts. So this is really useful if you actually want to push, start, stop your apps from the command line. If you don't want to do that, you have the ability to push your apps, start and stop them from the app dev webpage. So you can pick whichever you prefer. I personally prefer to use the command line console. So as part of this update script, I need to define the IP address of the phone I'm actually currently working on. So that is 10.24.22.224. So now I can go ahead and install the Hello World app and let me bring up the screen so you can see it. So I have a status of 1 here, so I know that it was installed. And let's show it, and you can see that it'll come up on the screen here when it loads up. There you go, Hello World. So in the source code for the Hello World, basically it's just doing a common app initialization step. I recommend just doing that each time. There are some other libraries that you may want to use as your app gets more complicated that'll need this app init step, although strictly for this Hello World example it's not necessary. But it imports the screen library and clears the screen, and then throws up a text widget on the screen that says hello and adds that to the top level window. So that's Hello World. So if one of the things when you're developing applications is there's a debug console to allow you to print kind of like as if you were doing web development, to print to the browser console, and that's with the util library. So if you come here and say I wanted to see a print when I loaded this, if I add the import of the util and say util debug hello from hello world.js, let's use single quotes for consistency, and I go ahead and push that back to the phone. Now if you do the log target, it'll basically show everything on the screen that's being printed with that util debug. And now I'm actually using the keypad on the phone, and I'm bringing up the Hello World app. And there, hello, you can see the output, the hello from Hello World.js. So while you're developing apps, that's extremely useful to help debug, because you can really display a lot of information on that console, which is, for anyone who's done any development, debugging by instrumentation is really handy. But that's how you do it when you're writing an application for a Digium IP phone. Also, the console will show you output from failures. So say I had a bug in the program like this, and I install it because I didn't run it in lint, so I didn't catch it, or there are some errors that lint won't catch, and I try to go ahead and show it. You'll see that something is wrong on the screen, but you don't know what it is. If you have the log open, the screen, and say now you're getting you can get the reference error that window isn't defined, and which line so it's line 8 on the Hello World.js. So Hello World.js line 8, you can fix it. Re-push it to the phone, show it, and let's we'll do the log in parallel here, and so now we're back to running the way we think we should be. So that's kind of quickly, that shows how easy it is to kind of set up a development environment on a Linux computer and go ahead and start pushing these example applications to the phone and start tweaking them. So really just that easy, under 5 minutes. Anyone who has a phone can go ahead and and a Linux computer can go ahead and get started. If you don't have a Linux computer, it's okay. All you really need is a zip and a text editor, and you can use this web page to go ahead and push your apps to the phones. If I go ahead and create an app here, you can add a zip file. Say you had a zip file, you could go ahead and add it here and push it to the phone, and that does essentially the same thing as that install target with the CGI script again. So you don't need a Linux console. I just I think it makes it quicker for me, but that's what I'm used to. Okay, so that's Hello World. Some of the other example applications that are in here highlight different features of the phone. When you notice when the Hello World came up here, if I bring it up again, it's what's called a foreground application. So it only has one window, and when that window comes up, it takes over the whole foreground of the application. Well, there's another kind of application that can use the area that's displayed by this asterisk icon on the clock, which is called the idle screen. So if you're going to use an app that displays ambient information that you just kind of want somebody to be able to glance at their phone when it's otherwise idle and see some information, you'll want to use the idle screen application. And the example of that is this big clock application. So if I go ahead and install that on the phone, and you can see what it will do on the phone in the bottom right hand corner. And if I start it, so you can see now my phone is otherwise idle. It's, I can still go to my call log as if it's I can do something, like I'm using my phone, but now instead of displaying the clock and the graphic, the big clock application is now writing into that idle screen. And if you look at the source for that, the essential, you know what? When I went over the Hello World, I left something out, but I'll go ahead and describe that here. What comprises a package that when you zip up an application and send to the phone? So all applications in a zip need an app.json file, and you need a JavaScript, at least one JavaScript file, and with just those two items you have everything you need for an application. If you go into the Hello World, there's also some graphics files, and those PNG files are what describe what shows up on this menu here. So you can see that there's this Hello World saying hi. Those are in this D40, D50, D70 app hello PNG, and that's described in this app.json file. So it has an icon file that says app hello, and the app engine will automatically prepend the model of the phone so that the D70 actually has different size icons for the application window. All applications are foreground. Anything listed here under JS files, App Engine will, when the application first loads up, it'll actually run those files, and most applications will only have one JS file there, and if you have your application modularized, it can import other JavaScript files with the require syntax. And then there's also this display name. This camel case display name is actually what gets shown in the application screen, and this name here that's not in camel case is how you refer to this application programmatically. So in the update script, you can see that the app name here is lowercase, and that's what's used to start and stop. You can see the app name. That's using the name of the application in the JSON, not the display name. The display name is only displayed on the screen. So if you look in the zip target, all these files right here, the Hello World JS, the app JSON, any media assets you have, all get zipped up, and then that zip file is what gets pushed to the phone and comprise the app window. So for a foreground application like the Hello World, like a solely foreground application, that's all you really need. Now, if you want to display information in the idle window, if you go back to the big clock application and look in the app JSON, it has this has idle equals true item here, and that tells the app engine that when it's going to start the application to not only create a main foreground window, but also to create a separate window that describes this area right here. And in the application, let me bring this window full size. You can see here for the setup, setting up a window, it's called twice. Once for the window, which is the main window that all applications have. That's the foreground window. And because this has specified it has idle in the app JSON, it can also run a setup on this app idle window, which describes that other window. And you can see that basically it just creates a label that scales it to the size of the window. So that's why this is properly sized for this area. But if I bring the big clock up into the foreground, the actual, oops, not the hello world, wrong one. If I bring big clock up to the foreground, third time's a charm, bring big clock up to the foreground, you can see that the text is scaled for the full foreground window, depending on which window is actually being displayed at the time. And that's done here because basically there's for each of the windows a label is created, and the label size is scaled based on the size of the window that is being added to in the code here. And the big clock code is well annotated. So if you read through it, and you're familiar with JavaScript, and if you're not, you might need to refresh yourself. But it should be pretty easy to see what's actually happening in conjunction with the API documentations that are on phone.digium.com. So the big clock application, a good one to display to get just the basics of idle window applications. So if I go ahead and stop that. The next common development task for the phones is if you write an application on the phone, some of the applications only need to interact with the phone, such as a big clock. If you wanted to put a Pomodoro type application where you had a timer, you could do that. That doesn't really need to go out and communicate with anything else outside of the phone. But most of the interesting applications need some kind of network communication. And the weather application is a good one to look for. This is kind of one of the more complicated applications because it has a lot of graphic assets. But what this application does is I'll go ahead and install it. Is it goes out to Weather Underground and displays weather for the current zip code. So I went ahead and installed it, and if I go ahead and bring it up into the foreground, I'll just do it programmatically here. It comes up with this. When it's in the foreground, it has a preferences menu to allow you to enter in your zip code. So if I if I entered in a zip code here, submitted it, now it's actually trying to go out to what would be Weather Underground and pull up current weather information for that zip code. Now this application doesn't, as it's written right now, it doesn't have a key installed in it, but I do have an example server that'll just feed some dummy data to it. And so if you go to server, let's see here, server, I'll show you where that line is. So I have this. It's actually using this net request object here, and the net request is, as all these APIs are documented here. It's very similar to XML HTTP net request if you've done any in-browser programming or AJAX type development. So a lot of, if you're familiar with that, you'll be really familiar with how net request works. So you create a new net request object, and then you actually open this open is what actually sends the call to the server to try to bring back the information. And then if you get a ready state with a 200 OK, then the response text will contain what the server sent back, and then this application then just takes that response text and puts it in the widgets that are on the idle screen window. So if we want to see what that looks like when there's actually a server listening, in this other window, I will go ahead and start up a node server that runs this server file here. What did I do there? One second, let me just pause this and see what's going on here. Alright, sorry about that. I had something using that port running in the background already. So I went ahead and started the server listening, and then now if I go back to the phone, And let's watch the log here and bring it up again. There's the weather, bring it up, submit, and then now I'm actually feeding back this server.js is for any request is actually feeding back a common set of data. So for example, say I wanted to change the city from Atlanta to the Huntsville, Alabama, Huntsville, and this is just a mock-up. And the server started up again, and let me go ahead and the weather application's written will poll periodically, and I can reforce a poll by changing that. And so now it'll say Huntsville, so you can see that it's coming from this server file. So the weather application is a really good application for showing how you can communicate with an external server and show that on the idle screen. And it also has some good examples of using image resources in your application. So how the sun and there's different icons depending on what the current weather conditions are, and it'll show how you can load those local image files into your main or idle window. And it also has a good example, if you look at it, about how to use one of the extended UI classes, which is this form that's right here. So if you go back to phones.digium.com, there's these basic widgets like text, group that you saw in the Hello World and the Big Clock. But then there's also these extended libraries, for lack of a better word, and the form, the generic form, is actually what's used to create this form to allow the user to enter in their zip code, or change, if you wanted to change from Fahrenheit to Celsius, or change from miles per hour to kilometers per hour. So if you have a requirement to do something like that in your application, the weather app is a good one to look at about how to collect information like that. The other thing that the weather application has a good example of is saving information on the phone. So in this weather.js file, there's this read file and write file calls that actually save the user's preferences directly on the non-volatile memory on the phone. And it's a limited resource, but there's enough there that if you're not, as long as you're not storing megabytes, you should be fine if you need to do that. Now these applications, since they're going out to servers, from a manageability standpoint, it's much preferable if you can actually have an application pull its custom config settings from a server, as opposed to saving them locally on the phone. But if you need to be able to save something locally on the phone, you can do it. If you look at the again in the API and look under the Digium core and the read file, you can see this the first parameter of the read file and the write file are these locations, and NV is non-volatile, temporary, or there's shared locations where you can share with the different applications that you write can share with each other. So you can see that this one is saving it to its app-specific non-volatile storage area. So again, the weather app's a good one to look at for if you need to do something like that. Speaking of getting information from the server, the best way is when any app is when you're deploying your apps and they're being configured by your SwitchVox or Astra server, as part of the configuration, the server can pass in key value pairs for your app. And so let's go to wiki-asterisk.org, and I'll show you where that's defined, at least for the DPMA. I don't have a SwitchVox server here set up, but there is a place where you can set key value pairs in your SwitchVox configuration settings for your phone. But if I go to phones, let me start over. If you go to wiki.asterisk.org, go to the main page, there's a Digium asterisk product space. So if you go to that space and under Digium phones at the very bottom, there's a custom phone applications with asterisk, and here they describe how with the in the resdigiumphone.comp how you can configure extra key value pairs that you send to the phone. So some of these under this custom application, and I'll go a little bit more into deploying with DPMA later. But for example, this user, this permission, this string here aren't used by the DPMA, so they're just sent to the phone as part of the config, and the phone can read those configs with the under this app get config and the settings here. When you get your config for your app, the settings contain all the key value pairs that were passed to it by your configuration server in your either SwitchFox or Asterisk configuration server. So this basically this util defaults is saying I want to have this app config, get anything that was passed in the settings, and for any of these keys here that wasn't defined in my settings, go ahead and use these defaults. So this is kind of the idiomatic way to say, give me my config that was configured from the server and provide defaults for those configs. And again, the weather application is a good example for looking at that. So the next application that I would like to look at is the caller ID application. And what this application is showing, or can show, is how an application can snoop on events or interact with the actual phone part of the phone. That doesn't make a lot of sense, but for example, okay, so I got the weather application here running. Let me go ahead and call. I'm going to call this phone, this D50. Actually, I need to start the caller ID. So I installed it, and I'll just do it from the phone itself here. So I go to my applications. Go ahead and start the caller ID application, and it's running, so I can go ahead and close that screen. So now let me go ahead and place the call again from another phone. So what this application what that's showing you is that when I call that D50, the caller ID application noticed that there was an inbound call and was actually then able to display information on the screen, and I can use the soft keys right from the application to go ahead and answer this call from my D70 test phone, and I can go ahead and exit the call with the soft keys from the application. So if you need to actually interact with the phone itself, this is the example to look at. I also have a server here to actually provide information. I'll tell you what this app's actually doing here in a second. So if I run my server here, and let me go ahead and make that call again. So you can see it says not found, because this application's kind of simulating if you have a customer relationship management application running in your environment, or some kind of database where you had improved or enhanced caller ID information. You can actually display those screen pops on the phone. So if say an important customer calls, and when any super important customer calls, you want to be able to provide notes of when they last called or who talked to them. You can now just do that on the phone, and somebody could look at it right on the phone. So let's look at how that's done in the source here, not the server, in the startup. So bring this full Digium event observe. So all the events from the app engine are the app basically registers its interest for different events, and I didn't go over these, but you have a common application lifecycle events, like you're in the foreground, you're in the background, when the app exits. But to interact with the phone, there's an event that the phone sends all apps called incoming call, and this app then on a new inbound call goes ahead and let's see, where is it? It will send out a request to get the caller ID information. And I'm looking. This is where it brings up to the foreground. Oh, maybe that's where it's actually Digium app under the show. Sorry. Show, just trying to do this quickly. Okay, so yeah, so when the show is called whenever the app is brought to the foreground, and when it's brought to the foreground, sorry, where is that? Let's start with net request because I know that's how it hits the server. Fetch notes. Fetch notes is called in the show. Okay, so yeah, so when the application is brought to the foreground, so the app basically says I wanna have a callback whenever there's a new incoming call, and in response to that new incoming call, it'll bring itself to the foreground, and when it's brought to the foreground, it'll actually call this fetch notes, which uses another net request object to go to a server and bring back any custom information. So if I go to where I'm running the server here and change it, I know that the D70 is what's calling, and I can say D70 is D70 test phone, and say my D70 is this is a really important client. And again, this is just a an example of, the server is not any real information. It's just a kind of a dummy, simulates a dummy database. So let me go ahead and add that into this database here, and I'll add in, I'll say let the server recognize the D70. So then now I'm running it again. So let me go ahead and make that call. So now you can see that when the application went and queried the server for the D70 caller ID, it pulled out the note that said this is a really important customer. So you can see that, say you have a Sugar CRM, some kind of CRM or sales, some kind of database where you keep information about your customers or your contacts. Now you have a way on your phone to go and query those databases and display them directly on your phone, as opposed to, say, a separate screen pop application that you might have running on your desk. So that is the enhanced caller ID application. And the only other one I have here is a simple menu example, and I won't really go into this in too much detail. Maybe I'll just show it real quick. Update. This is another. This is another enhanced or a UI library that shows how to generate a menu. For example, like the preferences menu, like on the phone. This menu right here. This menu right here is done with the same library. So a lot of the applications that have been shipping on the phone since the phones were first released are all written using the same app engine that you can write your applications in. So if I go ahead and install this, let me close the default menu, show and bring up the log. So now as you go down and say you press the help soft key, you can say you can see in the code where these prints are, where those callbacks get processed, or say you select menu item number 1, selected menu item 1 for cancel or exit. So if you need to present a menu, the menu example is a good example of how to do that. But those kind of cover the vast majority of the types of things those are all these example applications. I think represent a bunch of good starting points for anything that you might want to do with the app with the Digium phone API. If you have any questions or you want to get more help or kind of get involved, under the phones.digium.com, if you click the forum, there's a Digium phone API forum specifically set up for the phone API. And so if you have questions or you want to reach me, you can go ahead and put postings on this, and somebody, I monitor on a regular basis. Somebody else, there are other people here at Digium that monitor it, and hopefully other people who are involved in customizing these phones can form a community around this forum of people helping each other. And also, if you have other things you want to see in this GitHub account, this isn't Digium official, but it's a lot of people find interacting with projects via GitHub to be extremely convenient. So if you say you want to see another example of something that's causing you a problem here, if you just post a posting on the forum and say, hey, I'd like to see an example of X, Y, or Z, I can go ahead and write one up really quickly and then push it out and then send you the list. So or if you have changes that you'd like to make to these example applications, go ahead and clone the project and issue pull requests, and we can take stuff in that way as well. So basically just kind of adding a resource, another resource to try to help ease people's development tasks. So I think that's about it. If you have any questions, again, please feel free to reach me on the forums, and thanks for listening. All right, bye.